Right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks to everyone for joining us at this month's virtual board meeting, our first of the school year. I'm Rick Cruz, Chair of the Public Charter School Board, and I'm joined this evening by Leah Cruci, our Vice Chair, Saba Barreda, Ricardo Ganjam, and Jim Sandman. We've got a full agenda for tonight, but I'd like to start with just a few announcements and reflections. First of all, and most importantly, a big thank you to all the parents, teachers, and administrators who've worked hard to get this school year off to a start. It hasn't been uncomplicated, to say the least, as we endeavor to support students in transitioning back to in-person schooling full-time while navigating this new phase of the pandemic. I know from talking to many parents and school leaders that it hasn't been easy and that it's been a ton of work. And the continued uncertainty around COVID and the Delta variant creates ongoing anxiety for parents and all of our educators. Today, Mayor Bowser announced that all school staff and eligible student athletes must receive the COVID-19 vaccine by November 1st. This is an important step because we know the most effective way to keep people safe is to increase vaccinations. This mandate will help to limit the impact of the pandemic on education, as fewer staff and students will need to quarantine. And most importantly, they will be at a very low risk of serious illness. We're pleased that many of our charter LEAs have been out in front on this issue. At least 15 of our schools instituted vaccine mandates without test out options prior to today's announcement. And at least 3 other LEAs achieved 100% vaccination rates among staff without mandates. We look forward to working with our partners in the district to ensure that everyone has access to and receives the vaccine in the coming weeks. And thank you again to everyone who's been working tirelessly for the last 18 months to support students, whether it's virtually or in person, across so many fronts: academics, mental and physical health, and social and emotional learning. Secondly, for this evening, we have some other announcements. And tonight, sadly, we recognize 2 board members whose service is ending. Naomi Shelton, whose term ended in August, and Saba Barreda, for whom this will be her final board meeting. It's rare that you have the opportunity to serve on a board with folks who bring as much humanity to the work as expertise. But in Naomi and Saba, we've had 2 such leaders. For many years, I've considered them colleagues, and over that time, they've also become friends. I will miss them both deeply, but I know that they leave the Pcsb stronger for their efforts. Some may not realize that Pcsb board roles are volunteer positions. The time we all invest in serving this city is a privilege, but it does come at the expense of time in our day jobs, our hobbies, if we have them, and with our families. And for that, I want to thank Saba and Naomi for all that they've given. I know both of you have a few words that you'd like to say. Saba, if I might ask you first.
So you say Naomi first. So thank you very much, Rick. This is very bittersweet. I think folks know that I have really enjoyed my time on the charter school board, and I have a son and a DC public charter school, and I believe deeply in the work of our schools. I want to mostly express gratitude and thanks tonight, first to the students, teachers, and families of our DC public charter schools for your trust in this board to make the right decisions to expand and increase educational opportunity. Many of our decisions are difficult, and many times you have let us know of your disagreement with our decisions. I have learned the most from listening to witnesses in our public hearings, visiting schools, and meeting with students and families. Thank you. Thank you also to our incredible staff at Pcsb who work tirelessly to ensure that our public charter schools are delivering quality educational services to our students. They also work tirelessly to make sure that board members are prepared for meetings. They are masterful at explaining challenging policy issues and breaking down data in a way that makes it possible for us to do our jobs with fidelity. Thank you to my fellow board members. I've had the fortune to work with several board members over the last 5 years, and I've always been impressed with the passion and dedication with which they bring to the work. You all have helped me understand and think through policy issues, challenged me, and made me think in more nuanced and thoughtful ways about difficult decisions. I'd also like to thank my family. I could not have been an active and effective board member without their support and sacrifice, especially on Monday nights when my husband has to do everything for our family. So thank you. And then finally, I'd like to thank the students and staff from my time at Sousa Middle School. When I interviewed at Sousa, the principal said this experience will change your life. These students will change you forever. He's right. My experience at Sousa led me on the path to working in education, led me to the path to being a civil rights lawyer, and led me to the path of being a PCSB board member. I've never forgotten the lessons that I learned there and the transformation that can happen through education. Thank you so much for everyone who has supported me on my time on the board, and I wish the best of luck to my colleagues.
Thank you, Saba. Naomi?
Thank you, Rick and Saba. It is so great to see you and also be able to celebrate you tonight for your last meeting. So I second a lot of what Saba has said, and will just add a few other things and details to that. So thank you to the members I've been honored to serve with over the last 3.5 years. Rick, thank you for your tireless leadership. Ricarda, Leah, Jim, and Saba, I've learned so much from each of you and have missed our in-person collaboration. I appreciate the efforts that went into the work we did to find Dr. Walker Davis, that executive search, and laying out that process was something that did not know I would have to reach back into my HR chops for. Our race, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and the other issues that we've tackled collectively. I've learned so much and look forward to seeing what happens from that work. To the former members of this body, I had the pleasure to serve with John Soifer, Steve Bombal, and Darren Woodruff. Thank you for your guidance and willingness to support me as I navigated the tedious onboarding process of this significant and yet at times daunting work. Your expertise and experience were a tremendous help in the early days of my term, so thank you. Thank you to the PCSB staff, to Dr. Walker Davis, and to the many stakeholders in our larger education community. Your leadership and focus on navigating the last 18 months have been commendable. To the school leaders and their school communities, your work to navigate this and the last school year have not gone unnoticed. Although I won't be there in the capacity of a board member, I look forward to the opportunity to visit your schools, applaud you and your team's tireless commitment to keeping your students and staff safe. So thanks to you. I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge the former leadership of this board, to Naomi Rubin DeVoe and Scott Pearson for their efforts to bring me up to speed so quickly and efficiently. The work that happened over the last decade, those foundational efforts, made it easier for me to create space to be honest, authentic, and real about what needed to be reevaluated and what tables needed to be shaken to transform this vital work. Serving on this board has been an important part of my life work, and I'm grateful to continue to advocate for children and with families. So pushing PCSB to reevaluate the application process in light of the pandemic and other issues that are going on, setting long-term goals for collaboration and a commitment to amplifying community voice, specifically the voice of those that have been the most marginalized. While I continue to do this work in a different way, I'm excited to have a little more room on my plate and a less of the burden of dealing with public life, including Twitter. So with that, I will just quickly say for everyone who has been interested, and just as early as this afternoon, I was aggressively added to a tweet. If we could all use that same energy to do the work differently and to make sure that we're thinking about solutions instead of amplifying problems, we could get so much further. And so a friend and colleague asked a question on Twitter on a regular basis: how are the children? And so we should be asking ourselves, how are DC's children? Our children and students don't have much choice or power. They are compelled by law to attend schools that their families and leaders decide upon. We collectively have a tremendous responsibility and commitment to be focused on their needs, not Twitter, not ideologies, not positions that stifle innovation or collaboration, but the needs of our most vulnerable. The future depends on the integrity in which this body functions. To whom do you answer? And it should always be the children. Unfortunately, the way that we answer that question today, right now in this very moment, with Saba and my departure, along with Steve Bombal, there are no Black members on this board. And so how do we incorporate the voices of the children, adult learners, parents, and the most marginalized communities? Because right now we have to do better to be able to answer the question, how are the children? So I bid you all farewell as a member of this board, even though my last meeting was last month. And I'll continue to maintain the high bar of transparency, accountability, innovation, and engage in collaborative efforts to see every sector of our education system improve on behalf of the children of the district. So I'm excited to continue to do this work that I've been leading with the National Charter Collaborative. I'm excited to collaborate with the National Association of Charter School Authorizers as they implement their new strategy focused on policies and practices committed to engaging communities of color, which is a body of work that we here in DC have already started on the path. I look forward to seeing you all at their national conference next month, where Dr. Christina Grant and I will be serving on a panel together, speaking about the work that must be done to create the most conducive environments for learning in DC and across this country. I love this city. I've committed a good body of work to this city, and I believe in our children and communities. And because of that, I'm excited to say that we should continue to work together so that we can positively answer when we are asked, how are the children?
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Saba. Wow. I'm just going to add a few additional thoughts, and then I'd love the rest of the board to offer their reflections. Naomi, someone who always speaks her mind, who said that when you accept the offer to serve your city, you need to stop having opinions, and who said you need to stop speaking the truth. That's not how it works. And Naomi, at every opportunity, you've used your platform to keep us focused on children and communities, as you have once again this evening. It's who you've always been professionally, and now I know personally, and I'm personally better for knowing you. So thank you very much. Saba, for 3 years, you were vice chair of this board, and I counted on you for sage advice, a keen understanding of policy, and the occasional legal perspective. I've always been impressed and continue to be impressed with how you marry your legal experience to the personal, as a parent, as a community a member, as you shared earlier this evening, navigating choices for your family and finding the right school for your son. Thank you for your invaluable contributions on so many issues. And while neither one of you will be board colleagues moving forward, as you both indicated, and I know you'll remain committed to public education in this city and in this country, and you'll continue to advance the fortunes of young people, because I know that's what's at the heart of your commitment. I hate that we have to say goodbye virtually, but I trust that we'll have an opportunity soon to connect in person. So Leah, Ricarda, Jim, any reflections you'd like to offer?
I'd love to, and I'll try to keep it brief. Saba, it's just been a pleasure to serve alongside you. There have been some key moments in the last few years that I've been on the board turning an idea concept over and over, and you've generously taken the time to talk it over coffee or a walk, always balancing what you know from your years of experience, what you've observed in person or at a school, and always with the best interest of students and families. Among what I will also miss is how, on top of your professional and thoughtful oversight, every once in a while your warmth as an educator shines through as you honor what a school leader has done well in service to their students and school community. So though we lose you in this capacity, the nation's schools gain you as you extend your reach to a much larger stage. So thank you. And Naomi, though I've had a few more weeks to process your service than I've had for Saba's, it's no less bittersweet to acknowledge them. Your absence is felt already. You were one of the first people I spoke with when I considered my appointment a few years back. And like Saba, you're on a lifelong journey to do right by children. I'm honored to be on that journey with you in these past 3 years on the board together, but on a continued way as a fellow DC resident and as an American. You model active citizenship that is unapologetically grounded in justice. Your commitment to kids, to our city, and to our city's commitments to kids is serious, but your joy in their learning and their lifelong success is authentic and powerful. I know it's what drives you, and I and we are all better off for it. I expect our paths will continue to cross down the line, and I'm grateful for that. Goodbye for now.
Thanks, Leah. Ricardo?
Great, thank you. I'll just add to both Saba and Naomi, I have really admired the passion, purpose, expertise, and authentic leadership that you both bring to this position on the board. Saba, to you, I have always looked at your legal expertise, your focus on students with disabilities with great admiration. The level of understanding that you bring from having been a teacher in the past just really amplified my view on the board. So thank you for that. And also now as a mother who's gone through the process herself and seeing that evolution. So thank you for everything that you've brought. Naomi, I've just really admired everything that you've brought to this board, your personal self. I remember the first lunch that we had together and knowing that you were going to change my views forever and help me see things in a new light. And you did just that. So thank you for that. I'm really challenged by that question of how are the children? And I promise that we will continue to focus on that question of how are the children? And I look to both of you as counsel on that, even outside of this board going forward. So thank you so much for everything you've done. And, you know, it's not goodbye, it's see you in a different atmosphere.
I'd like to add my gratitude to both Naomi and Saba for being such kind and thoughtful mentors and teachers to me. I began learning from Saba before I even joined the board. We had a joint confirmation hearing, and Saba went first. When she was done, I just wanted to say what she said, hoping I might be able to get off with that. Such was not to be, but I didn't think it was possible to put any better what I hope to accomplish in my service on the board than what Saba said. Saba is thoughtful and nuanced. She's honest. She's open to other views. She has an ability and willingness to listen. She's always respectful. I think she has a great mind. I really think Saba is a great lawyer, and one lawyer to another. I've just really enjoyed having her perspective on the board. She's analytical, she's a clear thinker, she's incisive. I just always want to say yes every time she speaks. What a great experience, Saba. Thank you for teaching me so much how to be a good board member, I hope. And Naomi, I'm glad that the path of your life crossed the path of mine. I've learned so much from you. What you bring is passion for the mission. Your question puts it all. How are the children? Every meeting you have a concern with the input of the community. How will this decision affect the community? Have we heard from the community? Have we done enough outreach? You have a real sense of what it means to serve the public in a role like this. The public and your colleagues on the board have been graced by your presence. I thank you for everything that you've done. I'm going to miss you both.
Thank you, Jim. Well, we are going to miss you both. Dr. Walker Davis, I wanted to give you opportunity I know we've said a lot, but if there's anything you wanted to add, and then we'll turn to our agenda at hand this evening.
Thank you, Rick, for the opportunity. I just want to say that I had the, I suppose, good fortune of coming into an organization in the middle of a pandemic, interviewing virtually, starting virtually, and I felt so welcomed by the entire board, but it was really important to me to have two well-respected, brilliant, passionate contributors to our community that were also Black women that welcomed me into this role, that took it upon themselves to model for me what this leadership looks like in DC in this sector. And I feel like I certainly haven't had enough time with either board member, but in the short time that we've had, it's been really clear where both Saba and Naomi, where you stand on issues, and the respect that you've had for the staff, for me personally, but our entire staff, the work that they do to get the board prepared, the way that you've asked questions and challenged our staff has always been with the utmost respect for the work that they do, and also a willingness to make sure that we have all perspectives in front of you and on the table. So I appreciate that. I've learned a lot in a short space of time. And as I said before, I do wish I had more time with you as board members. But in fact, in some ways, I'm looking forward to developing even richer relationships as you're out in the community, knowing that there are those who understand this work, who are out in other spaces, amplifying the efforts that we are all working towards. So thank you, and thank you for always keeping an eye on our children and our community.
And now they have more time to spend with you. So I'm sure you'll take them up on that. All right, well, thank you. We're gonna turn to our agenda. Naomi, you get to depart if she hasn't already. There she goes. And Saba, this will be your last meeting. We're gonna get right into it. As we move through each agenda item this evening, Brianni, as usual, who will moderate, will unmute DC PCSB staff or individuals speaking on behalf of the school. The hand raising feature has been disabled on our Zoom webinar this evening. Individuals who previously signed up to testify will be called upon. And as a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website. If you didn't sign up by sending your name to the public comment mailbox before this meeting, please submit your comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or call our public comment line, where you may leave a voicemail testimony. That number is 202-328-2660. Select option 2, and you can leave voicemail testimony. We have a short list of witnesses, public witnesses this evening. I believe we have one. And Brianni, we will start with Patricia Stamper, if she is on the line.
Patricia, you're unmuted.
I see her, Brianni, but she is muted. Oh, there we are. I think we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, you said Patricia Stamper, but I'm Patricia.
Oh,
that's okay.
I'm sorry. That's what I had written down. Apologies for that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay. Good evening, PCSB members. My name is Patricia Sanabria. I was a charter school teacher for the past 7 years, and I'm here today representing Empower Ed. We have a pressing need for both autonomy and accountability in our schools. The pandemic has emphasized this need more than ever by proving how incredibly important it is for schools to be allowed to reflect and adapt to the needs of their communities. Charter schools have the unique ability to do this with quick turnaround times. Throughout the pandemic, charter schools across the city have showcased their ability to make swift, impactful changes based on the concerns of their students, teachers, staff members, and parents. They did this through their planning of virtual learning in March of 2020, through the ways they train their staff members to teach in the virtual setting and guide students through the transition, through their distribution of technology, through their adjustments of their bell and weekly schedules, and through their student support strategies. They've continued to display their reflective adaptiveness through the return to in-person learning by doing things like purchasing classroom technology for fluid hybrid learning, seeking input from their teachers and staff members, developing and adhering to strict COVID protocols, and more. Meanwhile, many DCPS schools are bearing the brunt of community ire and exasperation with seemingly few opportunities to make significant changes. Empower Ed has always believed in the importance of all schools being transparent and accountable to those they serve. To serve your community well, you need the right dose of autonomy. As we continue to hear from teachers that charter schools are finding ways to respond to community needs in ways that go above and beyond DCPS or DC health protocols, I leave you with 2 questions. How can we make adjustments to our current system to make this balance the norm in every charter school and in all DC schools? What can you do in your position to make that happen? Thank you for your time.
You're on mute, Rick.
Sorry. That is our witness list for this evening. And thank you, Ms. Sanabria, for your public testimony, and we're now going to turn to PCSB staff on several discussion items and charter amendments as part of our public hearing process. I believe Brianna Rashida Young is going to join us first.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
There we can hear you and see you. Hi, Rashida.
Hi, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Rashida Young, Chief School Performance Officer, and I am here to provide updates on DC PCSB's revised accountability framework. And to jump us off, I'd actually like to pull up a PowerPoint deck and just walk through staff's proposed changes, and then we can discuss any items the board may want to focus on. And just let me know when you're ready, Bree.
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So again, this conversation is about our proposed framework for the proposed measures and categories. To begin this conversation, you can go to the next slide, Bree. So to begin this conversation, I'd like to highlight DC PCSB's new mission because this is what is leading our work on the accountability framework. I bolded the particular area that stands out as we have developed this framework. DC PCSB has an overall focus on making sure all students are thriving, including those who have been historically marginalized. So for our accountability work, we really want to make sure that we keep that in mind. And that we have equity and academics at the forefront of this framework. And also, as you know, one of the strategic priorities is to pilot and implement a new accountability framework. So what I'm presenting today is really in service of that priority. So getting into the purpose of the framework, as we've discussed before, the primary purpose of the new accountability system is for our board to make school oversight decisions. So this may include decisions related to goals determination for those schools that use the framework as their goals. But there are other goals, or I'm sorry, there are other decisions that our policies are based off that use our performance framework. For example, the enrollment ceiling increase policy and also letters of good standing. There are other decisions that are based on the framework. At the same time, the framework is used as a mechanism to communicate school performance with communities, and we know that parents do use the tool to inform decisions on school choice, among other tools that are available in the city. Next slide. So right here, this is just the list of guiding principles for the framework. And I want to highlight that while this framework will provide a rigorous, attainable benchmark to measure school performance, we're really aiming to reward high levels of growth for all students. So this is really our North Star as we develop the framework to make sure that we are always looking back at these guiding principles and making sure that the new measures we're proposing align with these principles. Next slide. So just to give a little snapshot of the prior engagement and collaboration that we've had with developing these revisions. In winter, in this past winter and spring, we had disseminated a survey to school leaders and community members to solicit feedback. The questions asked about the current PMF. They also asked what new measures they might be interested in, and just to give overall feedback. Then last spring, we held a number of small group meetings with LEA leaders to gather feedback on potential new measures. We had at least 25 meetings and really spoke to the vast majority of LEAs. From March to August, we also met monthly with Mathematica and its regional educational laboratory. And in those meetings, we discussed research, we explored different measures, we considered models that were used nationwide. We really took apart different models and talked about what could work for the framework here at the Public Charter School Board, what would be in service of our mission. And they helped us to really put a lot of measures on the table that we could later explore with schools. This past June, we met with school leaders to discuss the list of potential new measures. This was a much longer list than what I'm going to share with you this evening. That list was really a culmination of what we had heard in the listening sessions and also some ideas that Mathematica had brought to us. But we always knew that that list would be whittled down a bit. Next slide. So turning to the framework vision, we are still looking at having a categorical rating system. So we're thinking of having a summative and a categorical rating system. And we're thinking of using names for performance ratings instead of numbers. We're also considering a 4-category system to better differentiate school performance for oversight decisions. And one of the reasons we came to this decision is because we realized our prior tier 2 rating was very large, and sometimes different decisions were made depending on where in tier 2 a school fell. So we're really looking to have a framework where it is much clearer what decisions will be based on those 4 categories. I'm sorry, the 4 levels. Next slide. So one concept that came into the conversation very early on and has stuck around is that all measures will be disaggregated by student group performance. While we are not locked into the federal categories that OSSE uses for its STAR system, we are starting with these as the basis of our work. We're also going to explore having special education levels by category or classification. So that's not a definite, but it's certainly on the table. And what the data has showed and what we've heard from you is that there's important context when different student subgroups intersect. So we're going to look into how we can include more nuanced data when those student subgroups intersect. That may just be for internal reports in the first years that are made available to schools, but it's certainly something that we want to keep on the table. Next slide. So these are the categories of the revised framework. We landed on these names, and as you can see, they are quite similar to the PMF categories, but we are really emphasizing school over student because this is an evaluation of how the school is serving its students. And when we dig into the measures, you'll see more of the differences there. Next slide. Okay, this might be a little hard to see on your screen, but the board meeting materials for this month have this in the memo, so you can take a look at that if it's hard to see on your screen. So this is the list of proposed measures. As you see, this is for pre-K through 8. One note for the state assessment, while we would like to consider a science measure, that might take a few years to figure out. So we want a stable and reliable assessment in place first. So some of the items on this list are perhaps down the road, but still something we want to keep on the table. So I think this chart does a solid job of showing where the differences and similarities are. One that I can point out is that with the PMF, we assigned points for Park 3+ as well, and 4 and 5, while in this revised framework, we would only be evaluating 4 and 5. And again, the memo has a little bit more detail on some of those measures and also the reason, our rationale behind choosing these measures. Also want to note that for school environment, back in the spring, we discussed the idea of school surveys. And while we've removed the school survey for now, if the city adopts a citywide survey, that's something that we could come back to for consideration. Next slide. Okay, so for the high school framework, there are a lot of measures from the previous gateway category. So one thing we were focused on in the work this year is to make sure that this is the right list and perhaps to remove and combine some of those measures. For example, the data that we receive from SAT and PSAT are relatively, they tell relatively the same story. So we're considering combining these measures from the current 5 that are used on the prior framework. Next slide. So these are the proposed measures for the adult education framework. We do plan on exploring expanding CTE, for example, perhaps including digital literacy as part of CTE. Generally speaking, for adult education, much of what we had before we have kept. They had already had a more recent adjustments to the framework. In terms of the engagement measure that you'll notice there on the chart, if we can't figure out an appropriate engagement measure, we would focus again on an attendance measure. Next slide. So for what measures have been removed, you'll see that we narrowed the list of achievement measures. We removed the middle school promotion, combined some high school gateway measures. There was a reading improvement measure that we had discussed that's no longer there. Mid-year withdrawal, no longer there, and also participation in extracurricular activities. And when I say removed, it's really a removal from the list that was discussed back in the summer when we met with schools. These aren't things that were on the current PMF. Next slide. Okay, so for future engagement, we are, let's see, sorry, my screen just froze. Give me 1 second because my screen just froze. Okay. So we have 2 advisory groups that are going to be meeting, one for the adult education framework and one that's focusing on pre-K through 12 framework. And we're going to work with these advisory groups to decide on the business rules for the measures, also to decide what measures are definitively staying on the list and what need to come off. Overall, our goal is to have a pilot tech guide ready to present to our board in May of 2022 that will outline, like, as I said, the business measures, and that will be part of the next year's pilot. Some of the data that we collect next summer will help with the next phase of the framework, which is determining the weights and how the framework will be scored. So that's really where the heavy hitting decisions are going to come in. So this is the work that will be done in the 22-23 school year. And during this time, we will have the advisory groups, and we will also resume the 3 task force groups that we've had in the past, pre-K through 8, high school, and adult education. And ultimately, our goal is to have a full technical guide ready to be presented to the board by May 2023. Next slide. All right, and those are the updates I wanted to share. We've actually shared this list with schools in a meeting that we had last week, just so schools were aware and had the heads up. So the real work begins now in these advisory groups, as I mentioned. So happy to discuss more with you all right now.
Thank you, Rashida. I'll open it up to the board. I have a few questions, but start with.
I'd love to kick things off first to thank you, Rashida, and the team. This is the product of quite a bit of work that's not even just over the last few months, but over the last few years. And also gratitude to those who created this original PMF years ago that set a new standard of excellence, holding adults accountable for the learning outcomes in public schools across the district. The DC Pcsb had actually been ahead of the curve Since the Every Student Succeeds Act was passed about 6 years ago, now all states, including DC across the country, must measure, report on, and improve school performance. And personally, speaking as a parent of both a DCPS and a DC charter school student, I'm glad that there are tools that enable me to gain an understanding of how well both district and charter schools are serving students in both my children's school communities. But I'm mindful that the STAR measurement is not the same as the performance management framework that we use in this body. The performance framework that this body uses is not only to communicate, as you said, to parent school communities, but it also informs critical, high stakes oversight decisions for this body for what schools have the new or privilege to serve public school students here in the district. It's grounded, as you said, in the new strategic plan's priorities and has been developed in ways that reflect that plan's vision. And this revised framework is the outcome of a really thoughtful process of gauging stakeholder feedback, research, and practice that embraces the responsibility we have to set high expectations while enhancing what we mean by both equity and excellence. So thank you so much for this.
Ricardo?
Leah, yeah, thank you. Rashida, also want to just echo the thanks for the thoughtful process around this. I did want to ask, how much of what is being proposed is actually kind of set in stone, if you will? What do you expect might change by the time the pilot or final framework comes out?
Yeah, so we're considering the measures that I just shared with you tonight as really the starting point as we meet with the technical group and continue working with our consultants. Nothing is set in stone on this list, but we wanted to communicate where we were in the process so that stakeholders are informed and not caught off guard at the end of this process. So as I mentioned, our next steps are really to work with these advisory groups to develop the overall business rules. And along the way, there might be measures that come off the list. There might be more nuance that we're ready to propose, by the spring. So this is our starting point, but certainly not, nothing set in stone.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'll just say one thing that did catch my eye is any measures around the ACT and SAT. Just knowing over the past 2 years, given the situation that we've been in, many students haven't been taking the ACT or SAT anymore. And so I'm curious to know what, and we don't know the answers yet, what the relevance of the ACT and SAT will really be in measuring our students' success in the future.
Yep.
Rashida, this is Saba. Thank you so much for this incredible work. Could you explain your thinking behind some of the scores being display only and others being factored into the score? Yeah, just the thinking behind that and what that might mean going forward.
Sure. Yeah. So the idea of this framework, we really wanted to make sure that there were all of the critical elements of a school's performance on our framework. But not all of those critical elements are ready to be included in the score or are intended to be included in the score. We certainly don't want to include a measure that the schools are using to help inform their instruction in their program. And by including it, it is somehow diminishing their ability to use it with fidelity, or because there is a more high stakes nature with it, it is in some way not used for its intended purpose. So we want a framework that is going to help set the bar, help present a holistic picture, but also we don't want any perverse incentives or to do anything that will make a tool that a school is using no longer as usable for them in their school. There are also measures that we're just not ready yet, or we have not wrapped our minds around a way to include it in a score, acknowledging how different that measure might be from school program to program. So because we have such a diverse portfolio and we have a lot of mission specific measures at each school that might be applicable to school A, but not school B, those might be measures that could be included in display only, but we have not arrived at how it could be included in a score fairly.
I was just, as I was looking through the proposed scores for high school and just going off of Ricardo's last question, as we think about kind of the new types of measures around high school performance, I think college completion in addition to college acceptance and enrollment is just something that we could, I don't know how available that data is, but something that we should think about adding.
Yeah, that definitely came up in our small group meetings in the spring, just persistence and what happens to these students when they leave the LEA. There are a whole host of challenges we would have to figure out before getting that data and having it be comprehensive for each school, but it's certainly something that came up that would be of value. Again, it's just the barrier of how do we get a very comprehensive set of data, but it's something that we're certainly still talking about.
Thank you.
I want to second that one, to signal to colleges that have the privilege of accepting, matriculating students from DC to know that students have support from K-12 that are keeping an eye on those other institutions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jim?
Rashida, thank you for the excellent presentation and for the outstanding work that preceded it. This is really very impressive and very valuable. I want to second what Leah said about the importance and the value of having our own assessment framework in addition to and separate from the OSCE STAR rating system. We have our own statutory responsibilities. We're responsible for the oversight decisions we make, and I think need to exercise our own judgment about what information can best inform the decisions that we make. And I think that the approach that you've identified does a fine job of doing that. You mentioned that there may be category scores under this framework in addition to an overall score. Can you explain the thinking behind that differentiated approach?
Sure. Yeah. So while we still see the value in an overall score, we feel that the categorical scores will allow us to see more deeply into how students are performing at a school, because it's going to be more nuanced and specific to that category. A school where students are performing high on the growth measures, though perhaps not performing as strongly on the achievement measures, may still be a school where students are learning at a really high pace. So having a category score allows us to meet more of the goals of the framework, where we're awarding high growth for students. It's also important to understand the strength of the school environment category in context with the testing measures. We've heard from schools and other stakeholders that a school is not only representative of its test scores. So we want to acknowledge all of the other measures that make a school and that make a student thrive that may not have anything to do with test scores. And by having a category score, we're emphasizing that by not just rolling it all up into one. And then lastly, we may want to consider using specific categorical scores for certain policy decisions. Up until now, we've really looked at the PMF holistically in our policies, and we want to consider having different decisions based on the score that was made in a given category, even while acknowledging the summative score and the value of the summative score. And then one more note I'll mention is that Mathematica, our meetings with them, this decision was strongly influenced by them and their research of the value of essentially having both.
I think that's very thoughtful and nuanced. More information is better than less. And I think that your explanation really captures the value of having that kind of approach. One more question. What additional opportunities will there be for school leaders in the community to comment on this? Where are we in the process, and how much more input are you positioned to get?
Yeah, so, like I said, we had this meeting with schools last week just to share, this is what we're sharing with the board, and to kick off or to let them know that the advisory groups were kicking off. We actually received feedback after that meeting that schools wanted more, not fewer, opportunities for engagement. So we've actually expanded the opportunity to participate in the advisory groups, which we initially thought might be small, but we don't want to limit any school that wants to participate. So the advisory groups, that is the most that is really the most concrete form of engagement that we have over the course of this year. But we also plan to share the takeaways and the decisions that are made from those advisory groups with all school leaders. And so if there are folks that are not in the group, but want to weigh in or share thoughts or say that they think we're on the right track or not on the right track, we're also open to receiving that informal feedback where schools can let us know, hey, I read the notes, I'm not on board with this or that. The advisory groups are really more of the technical decisions. There are larger philosophical questions that are still to be tackled, and we will still tackle those. Next year, the task force meetings will start back up. And so a lot of the questions of how the weights will be established and what the targets will be, that's going to come in next year with the task force meeting. So whether a school leader has a philosophical approach that they are interested in sharing, or they have something more technical, I think that between the advisory groups this year and the task force next year, that there will be time to weigh in. And then there's always just reaching out to staff, myself, or anyone on the team if somebody has ideas or a reaction to something that they've seen.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Rashida, thank you. Dr. Walker-Davis, thank you as well. I know this is some focus of your first year, and I did want to also acknowledge Leah and Jim as members of our school performance committee, and I know that this has been a frequent topic in those meetings across the last year. Rashida, in some ways, you could argue that there's no better time for us to evolve our performance framework, given all that students, families, schools have gone through over the last 18 months. But I'd also love for you to maybe characterize schools' engagement and just their capacity. I started out this meeting talking about how much schools and communities and families and teachers to a person have been doing over these last 18 months and across this next year. Could you just give us a little bit of the color of those conversations and how they're balancing it all?
Yes, absolutely. So I think it's important to note that if we were having this conversation at the beginning of 2021, at that time, we thought that we would have had an accelerated development of the pilot, and then that the pilot was going to start this year, this school year. At that time, we thought that there would be testing in the spring. We thought that there would be data to react to. And what we learned, aside from there not being testing in schools continuing in this virtual format for the rest of the year, but we also did hear from schools that the timeline felt rushed and that there was concern that there was not enough time for schools to provide the type of feedback that needed to happen when we're making such robust changes. So we did slow down the timeline. It is a long timeline, but I think given all that is on schools' plates with reopening and everything that's going on with the pandemic, we certainly didn't want schools to feel like they had to choose between engaging with us in this framework or focusing on reopening. So really by spreading it out, I'm hoping that we are allowing schools the opportunity to do both. If they don't have the capacity to engage in advisory groups this year, but they know that they want to get on board next year, or at least join task force meetings, there's a path for that. So it is a slower timeline. It is a time of a lot of uncertainty. But at the same time, we know that schools have a lot on their plates outside of this framework changing. And so we're trying to balance putting something in place so that we can restart accountability, but also acknowledging the times that we're in. And there is so much else going on in addition to, needing accountability.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the thoughtful approach that we're taking and the way the process has evolved as well, based upon the feedback from schools. So yeah. Thank you. Board members, any other questions? Pretty significant body of work that's been in motion for quite some time and will be in motion for quite some more time. So I trust Rashida will we'll be hearing more about this across the coming months and year. And I think this board would be very interested in hearing with some regularity of how the advisory groups are informing some of the softer decisions before we get to some of the pilot work. So thank you. Thanks.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I don't think you're going anywhere, but Katie Damon is joining us for our next topic.
Yes, I sure am. Good evening. My name is Katie Damon, and I am a senior manager on the school performance department. Tonight, I'm here to speak with the board about our annual charter application cycle. Over the next year, DC Pcsb staff will take several critical steps to improve the review and evaluation of new school application requests and requests for grade expansions, including ensuring expectations for new and expanding schools are aligned with measures of quality included in our revised accountability framework, engaging with community stakeholders, especially families, to understand the program types that are in demand, and assessing DC's student enrollment landscape in a post-COVID environment to ensure new schools are successful and students can thrive. Each of these steps are in alignment with our strategic plan released in June. The revised application cycle will be launched in 2023. In service of this goal, DC Pcsb will not be accepting applications for new schools or grade expansion requests during the remainder of 2021 or during 2022. DC Pcsb will release revised charter application guidelines in summer 2022 and looks forward to reviewing a strong, innovative batch of charter applications in 2023. Tonight, I am happy to answer any questions about this decision, and I also welcome any reflections from board members about this announcement.
Thank you, Katie. I'll open it up to the board.
I can go first. First off, thank you, Katie. I know the team has really thought very carefully about this decision, and I think it makes a lot of sense to align our application process with the strategic plan. I think it's the best outcome for future schools. Can you talk a little bit about how the team is thinking about how they will balance the need for new innovative schools, which of course is the statutory mission of the PCSB, against the viability of existing programs, which is a question that's come up quite a bit during our applications process?
Yeah, sure. And so this is a question that's really at the forefront of my mind, Saba, as we are revising our process. And I still don't have the perfect answer to this question, but it's something I'm thinking a lot about. And I think right now, the thing I am focused on is making sure that at the end of this process, we don't have a charter application evaluation process that is overly prescriptive. A way that I think we can do that is making sure applicant groups have access to good, reliable data and input gathered from the community when writing their proposal and creating their case for demand, but not putting parameters around our applications process that are so strict that, you know, an applicant group with a new or novel approach would feel discouraged from applying. Although, of course, they would still need to make their own case for demand. So throughout the process, I will be making sure that we are striking that right balance of considering the needs of the current ecosystem alongside the need for new kind of creative programs that families want and that the city needs.
I'm sure you've already thought about this, but we do have a number of applicants who have expressed the satisfaction of demand that their school would bring through very creative community involved processes. And so just if there are ways to highlight that we've had successful applicants that have done that so that new applicants can see that there is a way forward in that respect, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Highlighting exemplars is something that is definitely on our radar as a way that we can move the process forward.
And Katie, thank you for all the work on this. Just to build a little bit upon that, thinking about how these past 18 months have impacted how people are thinking about education, are you going to continue to meet with and engage with prospective applicants throughout this year and next year before the next round of applications are coming forward?
Yes, thank you, Ricarda. So we are definitely committed to ensuring that lines of communication with prospective applicants remain open, even though we will not have concrete guidelines and expectations to share with prospective applicants until next summer. I plan to create space to both collect feedback and share updates about our revision process with them. I really want to make sure that if there are applicants out there with a really thoughtful idea, that they are not discouraged by this short pause.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Leah?
Jim.
Oh. Sorry, I didn't see you there, Jim.
Go ahead, Leah.
Oh, I just unmuted. You raised your hand. Okay. Well, thank you for this, Katie. Kind of brass tacks. Will DC PCSB continue to accept requests for enrollment ceiling increases?
Yes, so we do feel comfortable continuing to accept requests for enrollment ceiling increases because the evaluation of enrollment ceiling increase requests relies on a school's historical performance rather than the evaluation of a plan for the future. That is something that we will continue to do. One minor shift we do plan to make for enrollment ceiling increase requests, though, is providing schools some additional guidance and clarity on how a school can make a compelling case for demand. Our policy as it stands is very broad, so we will be releasing some updated guidance through our business rules document to understand some of the metrics that we think are strong in terms of making the case for demand. And so we just want that to be helpful to schools as they are considering enrollment ceiling increase.
Jim?
Thank you for the excellent presentation, Katie. My questions have been answered, but I just want to note my agreement with the three rationales for pausing applications that you gave. I think they're all important, making sure that our application process aligns with the new strategic roadmap, getting input from the community, fresh input on what the current state of demand is, and taking stock of where we are post-COVID. I think we're in a very fluid environment right now. I think we need to let things settle a little bit before we can accurately assess what the enrollment and demand situation is going forward. So I think it's a smart approach and I support it.
Chairman Cruz, if I may just amplify a point that Ms. Damon made just around alignment with our strategic plan. You've just heard from our Chief School Performance Officer about our accountability framework and all of our efforts to sort of amplify equity and excellence. And we will have the benefit of having that accountability framework in place as we are assessing new applications. So I just want to amplify that we want to see consistent alignment as we're assessing whether a school can deliver on their mission. We also want to have clarity around the expectations that they will be asked to meet with regard to accountability. So I think I just wanted to amplify that there is connection between what you just heard and our discussion around applications.
You took my reflection. That was going to be my point. But I obviously the plan that you all presented this spring is informing a lot of what we're talking about this evening, as you would expect it to. So I think, as Jim suggested, the rationale holds, and it is entirely consistent with the plan. So I appreciate that. Katie, how many charter application cycles have you been involved with in some capacity?
Ooh, throughout my tenure at PCSB, probably 11 or 12 total cycles, including fall and spring.
I was going to say, I think there's probably no one better to help us lead our rethinking of some of these aspects of the application process. I know I think almost the entirety of my tenure on this board, you've been a critical part of that. So appreciate all the effort that has gone into this. It's not an insignificant pause. But it is one that I think is important for us to take as we live the plan and set the path forward. So thanks for all the work that's gone into this.
Thank you. We're really excited. about the work moving forward.
Yes. Excellent. Board members, any other thoughts or questions? All right. We know where to find Rashida and Katie, and again, I imagine us getting somewhat regular updates on how the work proceeds. So looking forward to hearing about that over the next year. We now have a few charter amendments, so we're not done with our public hearing yet. So the first one up is on Creative Minds. So Nada and Quinyan.
Hello, my name is Nada Musa. I'm a school performance department specialist. Creative Minds International Public Charter School is requesting to amend its mission statement and goals to its existing charter. The school seeks to change its mission to more succinctly define its commitment to inclusive learning. The proposed new mission is to cultivate within all of our students the mindset, skills, creativity, and commitment to equity essential in becoming globally aware and independently minded citizens. The school also seeks to expand the grade bands assessed under its Northwest Evaluation Association Measures of Academic Progress, or NWEA MAP goal. Currently, in its 10th year of operation, Creative Minds International PCS educates 540 students at one campus in Ward 5. The school is here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Brianna, do we have, sorry, I'm trying to navigate my screen to see, make sure we've got the team who's speaking on behalf of Creative Minds. Do you have some opening remarks?
I understand I have a short amount. This is Chuck Jackson. I'm the
Hi, Chuck.
Rick, how are you? And thank you, board members, for giving us a chance to be heard today. And Nada, thank you for walking us through this process. Your assistance has been really, really wonderful throughout. As she mentioned, I don't have much to say, except I'm the new leader here. I've been here for 2 years, and it became very clear that we had to focus the school more on a clear mission and re-up our commitment to all students and to equity. And so we met with our community over a 6-month strategic planning process before the pandemic sent us out. And then we also had many town halls to talk about it and present it to both our board as well as our parents. And through the Open Meetings Act, we discussed it as well. We feel like it captures the essence of Creative Minds, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the mission. Namka Long, my Chief Academic Officer, I believe is joining us too tonight, who can answer any questions about the goal. But that's very simple. We just want to apply the same measurement. It was written as K to 5. We're now K to 8 school. We want to cover all grades.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'll venture a question, which is, as you reflect on needing to focus, as you said, coming on board as the new head of school, oftentimes that's as much about what you choose not to do as it is what you choose to do. If I were a family member, if I were a parent of a student, how would you explain what is no longer part of the program, or is that? So I'm just trying to sort of understand if anyone walks away thinking, there's less of what I came to Creative Minds for, as opposed to a reframing of what it is that you're getting at the school.
I would actually say it's a reframing and enhancement of the things that work well at Creative Minds. There's been no fundamental changes to the curriculum, to any of the offerings within the school. If anything, we've doubled down on talking about equity and being more globally aware, really committing to independently minded students. We developed a graduate profile, which is going to go through all of our grades, which will be shared with our entire community. So folks really know what they're getting into and how their children are going to grow during their hopefully 11 years with us.
So the projects and art-based curriculum that's incorporated in the earlier version is still part of the program. It's just not in the vision.
Absolutely. Yeah, we focused on the what in our mission statement. What are we going to produce versus the how? And I think that's an enhancement generally across the industry for us all, that we now are focused on the students, not how we're going to get the students to be graduates. And that's, of course, explained in great detail on our website and many, many times in many of my meetings with folks.
Thank you.
Thank you both for this. Can you recap for us, however briefly, how you engage the community through this process?
Sure. Very quickly, I was brought on as an interim. I'm now the permanent ED. And I was asked to sort of assess the school, the culture of the school. We had very high teacher turnover. Our retention rates were declining. And the question was, what was going on? What was wrong with the school? Was the board asked me, fix the school? What was wrong with it? And it was less that what was wrong, but we kind of had 80 people rowing in 80 different directions. We had lost focus. And so we worked with Bellwether to do a 6-month strategic planning process where we engaged our community, both staff, students, and I guess I should say all three, staff, students, and the parents, in what that looks like and what kind of school they think Creative Minds should be, what's working, what's not working. And then we had a very big list, and just like public charter school board is going through right now, we started boiling it down to the sheer essence, knowing that everything is built on top of that. If you don't have a strong skeleton, the body's going to be weak. So we wanted to make sure our skeleton was strong. And again, the pandemic threw us a little bit of a curveball, because that's right when we started doing some of the heavy lifting around the mission statement. But we continued it virtually. We made sure we talked about it with our staff, and certainly talked about it with our students and with the community at large to make sure they had an opportunity to provide input into it. And in fact, it's kind of the fact that the word all, to cultivate within all of our students, was a parent suggestion to capitalize that, to make it very clear that we treat and we work with all students. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members for the Creative Minds team?
I think I just throw one more in to ask about how the school intends to monitor progress and rigor in between the NWEA MAP testing windows.
Nyamka,
Sure.
there you go. Here's
Yeah.
my chief academic officer who knows everything.
Yeah, so hi, good evening. Thanks for that question. Yeah, so what we'll do is we will, those 3 times throughout the year, beginning, middle, of end of year, we'll provide that MAP assessment. We have added additional team members to our instructional leadership team, our instructional coaches who will work. We're going to do a high-level school-wide data dive to look at that information when we get that. And then the great thing about our school is that each of our classroom has at least 2 teachers, and they'll be taking that information and creating small groups and really targeting, doing those mini lessons in between those times that the assessments are given, and then doing small group work and doing informal assessments, gathering additional information to determine if different groups need to change, so that we're really meeting the needs of the students. And so really encouraging and supporting our instructional coaches to kind of be those data leaders on our teams, and really not just have those 3 set points of the year where we're looking at beginning of the year data, middle of the year, and end of year, but a continuous more opportunities to reflect on data, having our students back into the building. We have missed that, and really the opportunity to really have a solid understanding of where they're performing, and want to ensure that we're taking very close snapshots of those times so we can see that growth over time.
Thank you.
All right, any final questions? So this is a public hearing, and we'll be voting on this in the October meeting, is that correct? All right. Well, thank you to you both for joining us, and hope the school year is kicking off as well as can be expected, given the challenges we all continue to see across the country. And we'll look forward to voting on this in October.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks. All right, and then next up, I think we're being joined by Friendship for their charter amendment as well.
Hello again. Friendship Public Charter School is requesting to operate an additional auxiliary facility The school seeks to operate this auxiliary site at the Whittle School and Studios located at 3007 Tilden Street Northwest. The school expects to use the location as a space for extended programming for grades pre-kindergarten 3 through 12, including additional in-person programming for Friendship PCS Online Academy. The auxiliary location will provide students with access to labs, maker spaces, and performance areas to expand learning opportunities. The school plans to start operations at the Whittle site upon DCPCSB's approval. Friendship PCS enrolls 4,519 students in grades PK 3 through 12. Friendship Public Charter School operates 16 campuses across DC, 1 online program, 6 elementary campuses, 7 middle school campuses, and 2 high school campuses. The school is here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'm trying to see who is Ms. Brantley. I see your initial. Do you have any opening remarks? Do we need to unmute them, Brianni?
They can unmute themselves.
See, Pat, can you hear us?
I can.
Oh, there you are.
I'm here.
Oh, excellent. Sorry, I was looking at another sort of screen. Thanks. Would you like to sort of share some context for the matter before us? And then I think our board members might have some questions.
Thank you. I believe that there may be other Friendship people joining, but I certainly will start. So first, thank you, Chairman Cruz, board members, Dr. Walker Davis, and staff. I'm Pat Brantley. I'm the CEO of Friendship Public Charter School. I want to start by acknowledging that this has been a challenging year. We have fully reopened at all of our campuses, and I'm proud to have witnessed at all Friendship schools, how hard our students, teachers, and other staff members are working to ensure safe and joyful learning. I'm thankful for our parents who have put their trust in us and are supportive of the many, many protocols in place to keep their children safe. This year looks different. In some ways it is hard, but it's still a great year for learning and growing. Finally, I'm grateful for your partnership and your leadership throughout the last 18 months. And I have to join with others in thanking Sabareta and Naomi Shelton for their service. I'm excited to talk with you tonight about an opportunity to more fully realize Friendship's mission through the use of auxiliary space. So as you know from our submission, Friendship is seeking to utilize auxiliary space at the Whittle School's facility to support programming for our LEA, including additional in-person programming for the Friendship online campus. I'm not sure if you can see my screen or the pictures that are up, but they are from our summer Reimagined learning experience and events that we held at Whittle campus last year. The Whittle campus is situated on 13.7 wooded acres in Northeast Washington, DC, Ward 3. There are several 100,000 square feet, of which we have initial access to approximately 10,000 square feet. So through our partnership, we'll be able to provide space that enhances our programmatic mission and vision by extended learning opportunities for Friendship students. The location of the school is within a short distance of multiple parks, including Rock Creek Park and the Smithsonian National Zoo. The school is also very close to the University of the District of Columbia, which makes on-site dual enrollment offerings much more accessible, as well as access to other institutions where teachers can extend the learning of all content areas for students. In fact, in discussing our plan with the ANC 3F chair, they were very supportive and offered to help us start the conversation with UDC. This request is partly driven by parent and student demand for increasingly innovative programs and experiential learning. But it's also a response to a change in reality for our schools. Our virtual school environment has increased and is currently at 157% of initial estimates for enrollment. Overall, Friendship's enrollment is up 8% over the Public Charter School Board's projections for this year. Our virtual school students regularly utilize in-school space for project-based learning, for labs, for arts, for parent training, and for testing. Aside from this, there's a greater need to access additional space in case of COVID-related site closure and to spread our students out in order to maintain safe social distancing. Moreover, we recognize the need for space that supports our delivery of hands-on engaging learning activities for our students who missed some academic and social emotional development during distance learning. I'm not sure that I can better convey what this opportunity would mean better than the parent of one of our Friendship Online students when she learned of the possibility of this location. She said, as a parent who has been part of the Friendship Nicholson Street campus for the past 3 years and as a PTA leader, this move is like getting a nonstop flight to heaven. My mindset and the esteem I have for the online academy and where it is housed has already changed for the better. And I've just merely driven around the circle at the entrance of the Whittle campus. I can't wait for my scholar to experience the endless possibilities of learning, even if it is for a day or two a month. The excitement of coming to this campus precedes the greatness that will inevitably abound. In closing, I would like to point to our recent example of the type of programming access that the Whittle campus will allow for our students, which I mentioned earlier. During the summer of 2021, to support our return to in-person learning while ensuring adequate social distancing in appropriate space, Friendship launched a Friendship Reimagined STEM camp for students across our campuses. To share more about this experience, I will be joined by Paris, who is a 7th grader at Friendship Woodridge International. So I hope she can join.
Let's see, I think I see her there, Paris. Oh, she was there.
Hello.
Hi, Paris.
Good evening, DC Public Charter School Board members. Thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. My name is Paris Dozier, and I'm a 7th grade student at Friendship Woodridge International Middle School. I was asked to reflect on my experience at the STEM Reimagined camp at the Little School and Studios, so I'm happy to share that with you this evening. In complete honesty, when my mom approached me with the idea of doing the STEM camp, I was less than excited. I wasn't sure how I felt about STEM, and the idea of sitting in the classroom was shifting my indifference towards disdain. To my relief, I was wrong. For starters, the school was absolutely gorgeous. It has a very modern aesthetic and quite literally enough space for us to shoot off rockets inside the building, which we actually did. It seemed the building was directly from a page of Architectural Digest. This STEM experience was impactful to me because it was unique. After distance learning for over a year, it was refreshing to get back to a school-like environment. I feel like I tried things that wouldn't have been possible without this camp and was exposed to concepts I didn't even know I was interested in. It felt like a perfect balance of learning, innovation, and fun, and I'm truly grateful I got to be a part of it. I think all students could benefit from an opportunity like this, and I would welcome the chance to do something similar to STEM Reimagined next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Paris. All right, board members, open it up for questions. As Pat mentioned, there are a few other members of staff on that can help answer them.
Thank you, everyone from the Friendship team for this and the impressive presentation as well. Can you share with us how the use of space given the distance from Friendship's other campuses will work and how this will impact families?
Certainly. So in our programs that are auxiliary, we do provide transportation to families. It should be noted, however, that our students are coming from all wards, particularly for the online students. So some don't actually need Friendship transportation in order to access the campus. And we have had multiple conversations with students that would be able to use the campus or with their families in our family meetings, and transportation or access was not an issue or concern. I should also note that in our budgeting, we put funds in for transportation.
Hi, Pat. Thank you for this presentation. Can you explain how the friendship schools will share the space equitably? Like how is there a scheduling system? Like how do you make sure that all of your schools get to use the space?
Sure, absolutely. So the first thing to note is that there's approximately 650,000 square feet of space. That includes 6 pod towers that are classroom pod towers, so 6 floors each, 6 spaces. Currently, the school that's in the space is only using 2. And so there is more than enough space for Friendship to occupy what would be dedicated space in 1 or 2 pod towers. There is also shared space that are the labs, the gym, art space, and that would be scheduled according to our use.
Do you have a kind of approximate number of students that you could say would be at the auxiliary space on any given day?
Yes. So we expect that it could be approximately on a regular day that we would be using the space about 120. However, if we are doing any whole team orientation or for our NWEA map testing, we bring kids in person and really have a need to spread them out, that could be 240 students at one time. And map testing occurs 3 times a year, sometimes with a 4th diagnostic test.
Thank you.
Paris, thank you so much for sharing your summer experience. You made it sound like a place I'd really like to visit and partake in. Pat, I did want to ask, what are the financial implications of leasing the proposed space?
So yes, so we have a portion of the space that we have a use agreement on that's no cost. For the additional portion of the space, or as we look forward into future years, it would be lease costs at the charter school average, which is somewhere between $28 to $30 a square foot. So if we were up to about, let's say, 20 to 25,000 square feet, then you're talking about $550,000 to $600,000. And we have budgeted that into our budget. So it does fit within the charter school facilities allowance that we receive.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Friendship? I have less of a question and more of a comment, Pat, which is we've talked a lot about different sides of growth this evening. We talked about growth in charter LEAs and innovative models. We've talked about the opportunities for us to evaluate growth in different ways in our performance management framework. And I think this is a nice way to wrap at least the public hearing part to talk about our students' growth or your students' growth in different ways by adding different dimensions of what they can experience and being able to take advantage of some terrific facilities. And I just really love the idea of being able to be more proximate to resources like UDC that can complement your work. So just all around to the team who has had to pull together the vision for this, and thank you to Whittle as well, and to all of you who are going to have to make this a reality over the next couple of years as well. I'm sure there'll be some challenges that crop up over time, but if Friendship has shown anything, it's that it can overcome those obstacles, but really just an exciting opportunity.
Thank you. I have to say, I was excited for what the kids would be able to do and what we saw them do in the space. But what we saw educators do with the idea that they are creating experiences that are so hands-on. And I know you have a long meeting, so I don't want to take too much time. But we had students that could walk to Rock Creek Park and they were doing testing of the water there, who immediately came back and said, we want to go test the water over at the Anacostia River. We want to go test these other things and really understand. And we can sit in classrooms and talk to students about experiments, but for them to get out in the world and do it. And this is sort of a launching place for that. And so anyway, not to take too much time, but we're very excited about the possibility of growing program and vision and impact. And that doesn't always have to come along with growing seats, right? And so we're excited about this and look forward to hosting every single one of you at this new location. We hope if you vote positively, but also at all of our other schools so you can see the work that we're doing. So thank you.
Excellent. As a Ward 3 resident, in support of exploring ways for you to you and your students to take advantage of resources across the entire city. So, excellent. Well, again, another matter that will be up for our vote next month. So I will take this opportunity to thank Friendship and close out our public hearing. Brianna, you can switch off the slides. And now we're going to turn to our public meeting. And I will, as usual, start with our approval of the agenda. So if I could get a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the September 20th, 2021 board meeting agenda.
And I get a second.
Second.
All right, motion in a second. Okay, roll call vote. Saba Breda.
Aye.
Jim Sandman. Jim, I think you're on mute.
The fire alarm building is off.
Oh, okay.
There's no fire.
I'll take that as an aye. Ricarda.
Aye.
Leah Cruci.
Aye.
And an aye from me. Okay, so the motion to approve the agenda has passed, and I will ask Katie Damon to return, and we're going to and Avni, and we're going to hear about at-risk preferences.
Great, good evening. My name is Avni Patel Murray, and I am a senior manager on the school performance department. Staff requests the board read into the record the approved at-risk preference applications. The at-risk preference approval and monitoring policy was created to implement the Expanding Equitable Access to Schools Amendment Act of 2020, granting at-risk students and their families greater access to the schools that they want to attend and ensuring that those schools are prepared to serve high number of at-risk students. Staff reviewed submitted applications and approved the following 11 schools to offer an at-risk admissions preference, and I'll read them now. Breakthrough Montessori Public Charter School, PCS, and I'll add PCS to the end of each school's name. DC Bilingual PCS, Digital Pioneers Academy PCS, E.L. Haynes PCS, Inspired Teaching Demonstration PCS, Sojourner Truth Montessori PCS, the Children's Guild DC PCS, Two Rivers PCS, Washington Latin PCS, and Washington Yu Ying PCS. And the final is DC Wildflower, which is a conditionally approved school slated to open next school year. As noted in the at-risk preference approval and monitoring policy, applications will generally be approved if the school demonstrates readiness to serve more at-risk students as evidenced by thoroughly responding to each of the prompts. All 11 of these schools that applied were approved because each application satisfied this requirement. Each of the schools also submitted a letter from their respective board chair confirming their board's support for implementing the preference, which was also required per the policy. This preference shall remain in effect for 5 years and may be renewed by an unlimited number of times, each time for an additional 5-year period. I welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Avni. Board members?
Avni, thank you for this. I've had a chance to read through some of the notable trends across the applications, but would you be able to elaborate on some of them for all of us?
Sure. Yep. So of the 11 applications, right now they are in the process of working with my school DC to determine the actual implementation method. So I can't speak to that piece right now, but in terms of how they are hoping to prepare their staff, many schools described the changes that they've already made, including additional support staff, such as additional social workers, leadership dedicated to academic support, and et cetera. We also saw several applicants who have already started engaging with their community, which include, town hall style meetings, written notification through newsletters, and the formation of committees to discuss equity and diversity within their school communities. All schools that have multiple locations would like to offer the preference at all of their locations. So they all had that as well spelled out. And I think that's the broadest stroke that I can provide, although each school program has a pretty nuanced written application to how they're going to implement the preference.
I'll just add that this has been a long time coming. I think that we've been talking about at-risk preference, the hope, the potential for it. It feels like even before the lottery that schools were looking, as you reflected in the summary, to either maintain the diversity and the percentage of at-risk students, or to increase it. So really, really excited to see these schools move forward with it. As one of the folks who testified to council in support of this, and got many questions about not just the adoption of the at-risk preference, but our ability to, or the school's ability to live into it. Could you just say a little bit more about and characterize the plans that were put in place, or the plans that are being put in place to ensure that each of these schools serve those students well? I know I don't expect you to go into the detail about everyone, but just some reflection of some of the supports and changes to culture, strategy, pedagogy, whatever it might be.
Sure. If you can just give me a quick moment, I'm going to pull up that information. Just bear with me just a quick moment. Great. So some of the schools talked through, certain types of supports that they already have in place. So, for example, they'll have a full-time social worker to provide individual and group counseling support. Some schools talked about using a school-wide social emotional screener to assess needs for the support and full protocol for identifying students. We had one school talk through partnering with WISE, which is the Center for Wellness in School Environments, which includes a team of clinical child psychologists, and also providing the school with intensive training. Another example is staff forming a equity working group to work and focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism in their schools. And in fact, a few other schools talked about that in their programming. I'm trying to see some other trends here. A family engagement coordinator, hiring also assistant principal of culture. Scrolling through some schools who talk about just also ramping up their teacher development, using instructional coaches, using a lot of data analysis and creating intervention blocks, and also infusing social emotional supports. So those are some of the broad strokes again that I can provide. But if you have any other specific questions, let me know.
That's helpful, Avni. Thank you. Sorry to need to put you on the spot there, but it's good,
That's
to get
okay.
some additional texture, because I know that is such an important part of this work, which is agreeing to take it on and then being in a position to take it on, and anything that we and the larger ecosystem can do to support these schools in doing right by these students. So I appreciate that. All right. This is not a voting matter. This is just one that we're need to read into record, but I do want to give any board members any additional time for any questions or comments that they have.
I just have one other question, Avni. When will be the next opportunity for schools to apply to have this preference? I know we're going forward with these 11. And so when can other schools join in if they'd like to?
Yep. So this application cycle is annual. And so we'll open it back up in May of 2022. And the applications will be due every year by July 25th. And then our staff will review the applications and be sort of reading into record each year in the September board meeting, as we are right now during that time.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Avni, I believe that timing is such that this can be seamlessly incorporated into the My School DC lottery, which will open in, I don't know the exact date, December, so that we've got several months for schools. And that's particularly important in this cycle because it will be new. And I know, as you pointed out, there are still some things that are being figured out as to how some of the mechanism works, but this will be, will apply to this next round of sort of lottery enrollment for families across the city for these 11 schools. So exciting. Excellent. So I think the formality is that I hereby read into record the at-risk preference application results. And so it becomes slightly more official than it was 5 seconds ago. But thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Avni.
Thanks.
All right. All right, we've got the consent calendar as we do each meeting with a number of items that don't require a tremendous amount of discussion, but they do require a vote. Before we do so, are there any items in the calendar that a board member would like to remove for further discussion, or any recusals? Okay, I don't believe so. Can I get a motion on the consent calendar?
I move to approve all items on the consent calendar.
Okay.
All right, the motion in a second. I'll do roll call vote. Ricardo Ganjam,
Aye.
Leah Cruci,
Aye.
Saba Breda,
Aye.
and an aye from me. The motion passes. Jim, I'm going to trust that when Jim said that the fire alarm was not an actual fire, that is indeed true, but he has not returned back. We hope all is okay there. Any new business? If not, I will take a vote to adjourn our September 20th meeting. Saba, do you want to do it for for the last time you get to vote on a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the September 20th, 2001 meeting of the DC Public Charter School Board.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote again. Ricardo Ganjam,
Aye.
Leah Cruci, Saba Breda.
Aye.
Don't think Jim is back. And an aye from me. The motion passes. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Saba, Naomi, thank you again for your service. We are going to miss you. Miss you already.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Walker Davis. Thank you. Thanks to the staff. And
thanks, everyone.
we will see you.